Hello everyone, thanks again for tuning in. Today I got a little something unexpected for you. It's kind of unexpected for myself. It's a list of games that I think deserve to be remastered. One in particular that I feel as though the iron couldn't be hotter for, or the timing better. Anyways, I've selected 10 games that I want to talk about today. That might seem like a lot, but some of them are related to each other, so this video really won't take long. I'll try to say a little bit of something about each game as I go, and I'll show some footage along the way if I have any. So I'm going to do these in order of how impactful I think these remasters would be. I'll start with what I think is the least impactful, but don't take that as it being the worst. I just limited this list to 10 games. Went through my game library and pulled out 10 games that I think deserve to make a comeback. And also, this just kind of came to me right now. I'm going to try to be specific whether I mean a remaster, a reimagining, or kind of like a revival. An example would be, even though it's not going to happen, a Suikoden collection. You know, I would consider that like a revival of sorts. Number 10. Despite this being the lowest on my list, I love this game. Sudeki for the original Xbox. This game has some of the most memorable music I've ever heard in a game ever. This game came out in 2004, and I still listen to the soundtrack 15 years later. Sudeki is an action RPG developed by Climax Studios. Like I said, it released for the original Xbox. I'll always remember it for its exploration. It has great environments, there's quests. It has other RPG elements such as leveling, learning and using new skills, finding new gear. All the gear looks unique. You know, you find a different sword for Tal, this guy right here. It not only gets a new, case on his back, the cases are actually really neat in this game. You put your sword on your back, and the case kind of, materializes around the sword. And the cases look different, the sheath, whatever. The weapons all look different. You can augment them with different abilities, like to leech life or I think SP. And yeah, it's got great graphics, in case I hadn't mentioned that. That's one of the first games I played on a console that was 3D that had shadows, like the shadows from the trees. I'm still like, wow, that looks really good. And I still feel like even in 2019, the game still looks really good. And it has a dark dual world system. I know a lot of games do this. They have light world, they have dark world. And some people are like, oh, you know, that's a very tired, theme. But this game does it pretty well. The Dark World is actually very dark. The game is rated M. I mean, I thought that they had a lot of good things in the game. It wasn't all negative. On the downsides, the voice acting isn't that great. The combat is rather shallow. Melee characters only have 2 attack buttons. Like on Xbox, I think it would be A and X. You can push A 3 times, you can push X 3 times, you can push X twice, and then A once. I believe if you do it that way, then you can chain pushing the A button an additional 3 times or something like that. And then on the flip side, you can do A twice and then hit X. And those are the only unlisted combos, I think. Otherwise, it's like AXA, XAX. I mean, it's really, believe me, when you play it, it's really limited, and worse is the ranged characters, Ailish and Elko. The game goes into first person when you control them, and it's basically a shooter at that point, but it's incredibly shallow. You can really only shoot and strafe. And it's not so bad when you have other characters on your team, because they'll be AI controlled. You can just switch to them. But when it's just either Ailish or Elko, and I believe you have to fight bosses with just them. So you have to shoot, and it's basically just strafing in a circle. You know, and I know the game sounds really terrible, but despite those things, there's the groundwork there for a really good game. And I would recommend that you play it if you can find the Xbox version. The Steam version is all right, but there's some kind of camera stutter that goes on. As you move, the camera it stutters behind you, and it's actually kind of disorienting. Number 9. I don't have a copy of this, so I might just have to put footage up on the screen. The original Breath of Fire. The Breath of Fire games used to run along RPG titans like Final Fantasy and Suikoden. I would even say Star Ocean. With the exception of the original game and Dragon Quarter and Breath of Fire 6. I'd say that the Breath of Fire series knew exactly what it wanted to be. I don't believe I would change anything about the installments 2, 3, and 4. I love those games. They're the best in the series. Breath of Fire 3 is absolutely going to be a game that I cover in the future. Let's be real, I'll probably do Breath of Fire 4 as well. But there are a few reasons why the original Breath of Fire is what's on this list. Firstly, I feel as though it's the weakest and it's the worst put together of the good Breath of Fire games. Today it feels like you're playing something that somebody made in an RPG Maker. The dialogue is bad. The graphics, in my opinion, just don't seem to fit. It's kind of like if you make something in RPG Maker, people are probably going to know that you made it in RPG Maker. I guess the easiest way to put this is, it hasn't aged well. I know the game received different versions later in its life, with Capcom releasing a slightly different Game Boy Advance version in 2001. The original game was for the SNES, and brought to North America by Squaresoft. Then, the undisputed king of the RPG. I feel like remastering Breath of Fire today could breathe much needed life into just one of many RPGs that are dead. I really wish Capcom would bring back Breath of Fire. Not a mobile game. Do Breath of Fire 1, get people interested in the series. Breath of Fire was amazing, and I never thought the series would die off, and here we are. Okay, this next one. This one's going to put a dent in the video. You'll see why it's going to go by quick. So this is going to be numbers 8 through 4, in no particular order, but I do have 5 games here. The entire, well, I can't say the entire, all of the Star Ocean games released in North America. I understand I don't have Blue Sphere or whatever. These games are awesome. Star Ocean is a really good series, and I feel like I'm following this, I'm following Breath of Fire with this, because Breath of Fire, unfortunately, hasn't received a game in a very long time, ever since, PlayStation 2 Dragon Quarter was on. I mean, yeah, we have the mobile one, but I'm not counting that. Star Ocean has been on multiple platforms. The original, I believe, was for the Super Famicom. We did get it here in the States with Star Ocean First Departure. So you have a game on PSP, you have the second one on PlayStation, you have the third one on PS2, the fourth one on Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, and then you have the fifth one on PS4. So you have this series that has not only spanned multiple years, but it's spanned multiple consoles. And because the fifth game, unfortunately, was bad, I would say that Star Ocean is now maybe teetering, because why was the fifth one so bad? It just makes you wonder. These games take a lot of time and money to make. So what happened to that time and that money? So Star Ocean could very well be teetering on that edge that Breath of Fire has fallen off of, Suikoden has fallen off of. Star Ocean could be on its way out. I hope I'm wrong, but it could be. I don't know what the odds of us getting a Star Ocean 6 are, but Square-Enix has clearly not forgotten about Star Ocean, because you can get the Till the End of Time, I believe on PlayStation 4, it's downloadable. You can get the 4K and HD remaster of The Last Hope as a download on PlayStation 4. You can even get it on Steam. So they're very aware that these games exist. Now, I would love to see them dropped into a collection. All the games on, 1, 2 discs, if that's what it takes, on PlayStation 4, on PlayStation 5. Put it on something, because you have these, I would say especially with the one on PSP, these are gaps for people. If you don't have a PlayStation Portable, this was not on PlayStation 3. I know, Ratchet and Clank, Size Matters, or Secret Agent Clank, or something was on PSP that you can play, I believe, on PlayStation 3. Not all games were fortunate enough to be treated that way. So this one, it's not really going to be a remaster or a reimagining of sorts, but I feel like this game could really use the attention to be consolidated into a collection, because it would make the first and the second game, which the second game especially, I feel like 3 and 4, especially 3, get all the attention. But 2 is a very good RPG, and I feel like 1 and 2 really need to be brought to more modern platforms so that people can play them, because I feel like the PlayStation Portable is a pretty obscure system. Number 3, Metal Arms, Glitch in the System. Metal Arms is a third-person action game released for the GameCube, PS2, and original Xbox in 2003. And let me just read you the back of the box here real quick, because I don't have any footage. Dismantling the enemy, one bolt at a time. Blast your way to victory as Glitch, the gunslinging half-ton fearless bot of Droid City. Found as scrap metal but transformed into destructive machinery, Glitch is determined to free his people from the evil clutches of General Corrosive and his maniacal army of millbots. Unleash a world of pain as you annihilate the General's sinister plan to dominate the world and salvage the robot race. To someone who doesn't know anything about Metal Arms, you might think this is just another mascot trying to get in on the action shooter craze of the early 2000s, following in the wake of commercial success stories like Ratchet and Clank. Despite Metal Arms being the only game in the franchise that ever got made, released, exists, I would say it's every bit as good as Ratchet and Clank. It's not a copy. It has its own brand of humor, its own level design, its own gameplay. I remember the game being so much fun that I went through each level and found all the secrets and unlocked all the multiplayer maps, even though I didn't have anybody to play the multiplayer with me. That's how much fun this game was. I looked for just one more thing to get out of it. I say it deserves a remaster because, at least on GameCube, yeah, the controls weren't quite ironed out enough. I can remember having a few issues with certain weapons like rocket launchers not going exactly where it is that you're aiming. You have to do a lot of firing over ledges in this game because you're above enemies, and rockets will come out of your launcher actually beneath where you're aiming and explode right at your feet. Even though you're clearly aiming over the side, your crosshair is over the side, your feet are on the ledge, so it wasn't as ironed out as it could have been. I remember that more than I remember the story, just because it was such a prominent thing. I can't tell you how many times I blew myself up. But despite that, this is definitely a gem worthy of a remaster. And Patrick Warburton was a voice talent in this game. And he was also the best live-action Tick that we ever got. Number 2, Secret of Evermore. Secret of Evermore has always been better than Secret of Mana. And this is coming from somebody who owned Secret of Mana when it was new, in 1993, or 94, I don't remember. I loved Secret of Mana. I never, to my knowledge, owned a copy of Secret of Evermore. Secret of Evermore took everything that Secret of Mana did well, which, let's face it, the gameplay is what that game did well, and it made it better. Gone is the issue of your companions getting stuck on L shapes, U shapes, and you have to backtrack to get them before you can advance the screen. You have a dog in Secret of Evermore, and they can be off-screen. He can be off-screen. And then he'll just come running back to you. They perfected that companion system. One aspect of Secret of Mana that has not aged well is the story. The story is laughably bad, mostly just due to its choices in dialogue. I have the PS4 remake, it's no better. Secret of Evermore has a story that reminds me of some crazy reimagining of Back to the Future. That's to say, it's just a young man transported to a different place, and all he wants to do is get home. The story is about a young guy. He gets out of a movie. He just saw a movie. He's got his dog with him. Wait, did the dog see? I think the dog comes out of the movie theater too. Your dog runs after a cat. You chase it. The dog runs into a mansion, which is home to some freak experiment that occurred 30 years prior. And when our protagonist goes in to find him, his dog chews on some wires, and both he and his owner are transported to the land of Evermore. Now, this Evermore's genius. It mixes the Jurassic with the medieval, with the Roman, with the future. The game is essentially divided up into like those 4 themes, and your dog changes as you travel to each of those 4. The game plays a lot like Secret of Mana. How you move, how you attack. You attack and then you have a percentage thing. You have to wait to recover and then you can attack again. Otherwise, attacks made in between are weak. You can level up your weapons. You can charge those attacks to deal more damage. There are command wheels, item wheels. How you equip stuff is the same. But the big difference is, in place of the magic spells that you get in Secret of Mana, you get alchemy in Secret of Evermore. And so consequently, in place of MP, you have ingredients now that you always have to make sure that you have on hand to use these, because every single alchemy requires its own unique mix of ingredients. And there's a lot more in this, but there's water, there's oil, there's wax, there's clay, there's roots. Secret of Evermore has a ton of ingredients that you need to keep on hand because your alchemy list just keeps growing. Secret of Evermore doesn't just play smoother, but it's far more imaginative. There's sewers, there's caves, there's pyramids, there's castles, there's a chessboard, there's a lot of areas in this, a volcano. Now, Secret of Evermore is not without its snags. It loves mazes a little too much. There's a maze sewer, there's a maze ventilation system, there's a maze forest. These can try your patience if, you just don't know the way or you're new to the game, especially that forest. But the game has so many memorable areas that these areas don't deserve to hold the game back. And I gotta mention the soundtrack. The soundtrack, even when it opts for just sound effects. You'll be in a cave, you hear rumbling. Maybe you only hear birds chirping and the wind or the sound of waves. Like, that's part of the soundtrack, and it works very well. But the game is not all just ambient sounds. There's plenty of music that you will want to listen to even when you're not playing the game. It's that catchy. So why does this game deserve a remaster? Well, for reasons I cannot understand, it's always lived under the shadow of Secret of Mana. I, for one, think that Secret of Evermore's biggest issue was that it was just ahead of its time. I think re-releasing it now would help it find the following it deserves. It's a brilliant game. The dialogue holds up well all these years later. It doesn't take itself too seriously. But unfortunately, it's one of those games that's got swept into a closet somewhere, and Square-Enix probably doesn't like to acknowledge that it exists. And I kind of think of Ghostbusters 2 a lot when I think about Secret of Evermore. I feel like people dislike it because it's a popular opinion to have. Ghostbusters 2 is not bad, and Secret of Evermore is not bad. Number 1, and I think I got something here with this one, and I really think the timing for this next few years would be perfect. Zelda 2. Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link, released in North America in 1988, 87 for Japan. Now, this means this game's over 30 years old. It's almost as old as I am. Even when I first played it, I loved Zelda 2. I was never in the camp that believed that the original game set the tone for how all Zelda games had to be. I welcomed the action, the strategy, the difficulty, the leveling up, the fact that it was side-scrolling. No other Zelda game to date, think about this, has done what Zelda 2 accomplished. And let me give you some cold truth here. Zelda 2 is a very well put together and excellent action RPG. Its only crime? Being released during a time in which it could not be appreciated. When Nintendo announced that it's remaking The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening, I had two thoughts. First, I thought, wow, that's awesome. That's cool, because I played Link's Awakening as a kid. And then I had a second thought. Still, that's kind of an odd game to just go back and redo. Like, don't get me wrong, I think it's a system seller. I really think that that's a big deal, because a lot of us played that on Game Boy. But still, like, what was the inspiration for that? Did they just pull a Zelda game out of a hat? Anyways, I looked up when Link's Awakening originally released, back on the original Game Boy, in '93. Back then, it was only the fourth Zelda game that came out. You had the original Zelda, you had Zelda 2, and you had A Link to the Past. My point is, Nintendo is starting to reach back pretty far in order to reimagine these games. It was just back in 2017 when we got an excellent reimagined Metroid 2 in Metroid Samus Returns. This was also a 2D side-scrolling action game. I say Zelda 2 deserves the same treatment, and if you ask me, the iron has never been hotter. I think Nintendo could give us a remastered or reimagined Zelda 2 in the very near future, just in like the next 2 or 3 years, and it'd be a smash hit. You can reimagine the game, reinvigorate whatever you want. You can leave it the way that it is, just with fancy, like 2.5D graphics. Throw in an easy mode for people that want it. Keep the original difficulty for the people who like that. Throw in an even harder mode. There's so much that they could do with it, and I feel like it would go over a lot better now than it did back then. Just to kind of prove my point, I grabbed a few games, most of them Zeldas, off my shelf, just to kind of make a point. Like, when you see these games that come out, that get complete overhauls, and they're excellent games, I mean, they could totally pull this off with Zelda 2, and I feel like that game deserves it. It is the only one of its kind in the series. I know that this one isn't a redone A Link to the Past, but you really could look at it that way. Not a bad game. And of course I grabbed this one because these, and 8 is included, these are, well actually I would say this one more so, because this completely changed the look of Dragon Warrior 7. Yeah, it was actually Dragon Warrior 7 on PlayStation. So if any of you folks watching have friends at Nintendo, tell them about this video and tell them to get on that Zelda 2 remake. So there you have it. That's my 10 games that I think warrant remasters, reimaginings, reinvigorations, revivals, what have you. Insert R word. What are some games you think have sat dormant too long? Never got a fair swing at the plate their first time, and they deserve a second chance. Let me know. Try to come up with 10 games that I didn't mention. Please feel free to leave a like on this video. I'm a tiny channel. It really helps me out. Subscribe if you haven't already and you like this sort of content, because I'm going to continue plowing ahead, making 2019 the year of my channel. Share this video with anyone you know that you think might enjoy it. And last and most important, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to watch, and I'll see you next time.